Jesus Freak here, and I've been thinking about the requirements that I would want to put in place, rules for a potential new translation that I'd want to pull off, since I had done a new translation of the New Testament a few years ago, and I hacked together something a few years after that. And I'm like, well, there's still valid reasons why a modern translation would be a good thing. But I don't really agree with how most of them go about it, and I haven't seen one that fits what I feel would be the proper way to handle this. Now, what I'm proposing here is currently not, set in stone or non negotiable. But here's what I would generally say would be my policies. The first is that the dominant text space shall be the Masoretic text of the Old Testament and the received and or majority texts of the New Testament. Other sources may be consulted, keeping in mind that there may be corruptions, especially so far as regards the codices Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, and Beza. Second, there's to be no translation of Apocrypha. Only the commonly accepted 66 books in their standard forms are to be translated. So, no 11th through 16th chapters of Esther, no big long poem in the middle of Daniel 3, etc. The third is that the standard handling of the sacred name is to be observed in most cases. I have reasons why I don't like the idea of putting the name everywhere, and one is intertestamental consistency. And for this reason, I feel that the best thing to do is keep doing what we've been doing and put Lord or God in small caps. Now, if the context doesn't permit the use of a circumlocution, I would transcribe it using the traditional orthography, Jehovah in small capitals. But I wouldn't use the name any more than absolutely necessary. The fourth is, if there are multiple interpretations, use the most Christological or Christian interpretation. If there's a disagreement between the text and a New Testament citation, and a witness favors the New Testament reading, follow the witness. In other words, don't read Psalm 8:5 as lower than God, even though that's the plain reading of the Hebrew. Read it as lower than the angels, because otherwise they're going to break a verse in Hebrews. And likewise, we can't use the maiden in Isaiah 7:14, even though that's the correct translation. We have to use a virgin, because otherwise we're going to break Matthew 1. The fifth one is, although if gender generic language appears in the original language, we're talking words for like person, people, stuff like that, it's acceptable so to translate them. If gender exclusive language is used, generic language should not be forced. In particular, gender neutrality should not under any condition be applied to Paul's audience. If Paul intended to speak to the women, in the vast majority of cases he would say, Tell your wives this. Tell the women this. For this reason, it is absolutely inappropriate to force gender neutrality on his words. It does violence to his intentions. The sixth is a dignified mode of language appropriate to Holy Writ is to be used. I use a Victorian type, meaning, oh, around 1900 style English. In addition, the former distinction of thee, thou versus you should be maintained, not exclusively between man and deity, but in the standard singular plural distinction. This is like what the Confraternity translation did in 1941. Possessive apostrophe s should be avoided in preference to of. Contractions should never, under any circumstances, be utilized. The Bible is holy, it should be translated as though it were. That should just go without saying. It's not street language, it's not gutter language. It's common language, yes, but it's not casual and shouldn't be translated as so. And the seventh is that the style of the translation should favor formal equivalence wherever possible, unless such equivalence would result in word salad. For example, the original Douay in Isaiah 5:1b had, "A vineyard was made to my beloved, and Horn the son of oil." And this is an accurate translation, but it's word salad. In other words, it makes no sense as it stands. So in those cases, it's necessary to use paraphrase. But those instances should be kept to a minimum. A possible problem, and something I see in a lot of translations, is they try too hard to be the King James Version. And this cuts both ways. They'll sometimes try so hard to be the King James that they result in an incorrect translation by the standards of the time that they were done. For example, usage of want in Psalm 23:1 or so in John 3:16. On the other hand, sometimes they decide to throw it out when there's nothing wrong. So I don't want yet another trying to be a modern King James. If it comes out that way, it comes out that way. But that's not the intention. This proposed translation should be used alongside the King James, not as a substitute. My intention would be, in church, the King James should be the standard translation so that everyone's on the same page, so that we all have the same words in front of us. Despite, whatever failings I may see in that translation. It helps to unify us. And I don't mean in the sense of ecumenical unification and to a Christianity that's been completely defanged. So that's what I'd like to try to do. Jesus freak out.